So we really want to start with mapping the journey. This is really about asking ourselves, like, what are all of those tasks that are involved in getting that job done well? And how do we solve it well? And the goal of this is really to support our customers' journey end to end. So as Stephen mentioned earlier, some people call this first use, some people call it onboarding. One of the reasons we call it first use here is because we really want to think about the entire first experience, all the way from discovering it initially to achieving the benefit of the product for the very first time. Because we feel strongly that first use isn't just that setup flow, it's not just creating an account. There's a lot that goes into getting the user onboarded and into your product. And so these are the kind of phases that we've mapped out that kind of speak to the overall process of a user getting started. So it starts with discovery. And this is where users first find out about the solution. In our case, we also have what we call in-product discovery. So you might start with QuickBooks and then want to add payroll later on. And so for those use cases, it's really about exposing the user to a really tailored recommended solution based on what we know about them. But this also applies to think about with all of the platforms out there for great marketing sites. There's a lot you can know about your user before they ever even land in your product. So how do we kind of mine that data and serve up a really a message that really resonates with that particular person? And that's all in the discovery phase. And then when we moved to the understand phase, for us, this was a really big aha. We realized that just getting people into the tasks to do the tasks right away wasn't enough. There was missing pieces. They weren't understanding what the product was actually going to do for them. And there might also be a lack of understanding of even what's at stake. So with payroll, for example, a lot of people don't even know that they have to pay employer taxes, right? They don't know that as a small business owner, they owe the government money. And so exposing them to those things in this understand phase, helping them understand why the solution is relevant and how it's going to benefit them. And I like to think of this as the slow down phase a little bit. We like to try to get people through as fast as possible. This is the phase where we really focus on designing for understanding, which could mean video content, it could mean illustrative content. It's really about slowing them down and making sure they understand how to use it. And then the setup phase, so this is the one I think about speed, getting the user through that data entry point or that configuration point or customization, whatever that kind of first onboarding flow is where you need to get to know more information about your user. That's the setup phase, and that's where things like if you can OCR something to save the user time, that's awesome. And then we have what we call the achieve benefit phase, which is really where that user gets to experience it for the very first time. So in the case of payroll, it could be something like cutting the paychecks for the very first time. And you'll see later in some of these examples, but you can already tell how first use has a lot of different components, and this takes time, right? A user doesn't necessarily do this all in one setting. So kind of keeping users engaged and making sure they achieve the benefit for the first time is really important. And then finally, we have the seal the deal phase, which in some cases can mean getting the user to purchase the product. So if they've been in a trial up till now, making sure that they've achieved the benefit, and then that we're able to make it really easy for them to pay for the solution. In other cases, it could be that we want to re-engage them in something else, and so they need to kind of go back through the phase and rediscover something new. Maybe it's a new feature, an add-on that they hadn't previously used, and that's what the kind of seal the deal phase is about. And so when we look more specifically at these phases, we have kind of these key considerations, things to think about when you're designing that discover experience or that understand experience. And on the discover side, we really like to think about some of the behavioral mechanics, because this is all about kind of persuasion and how do you come up with a relevant message that's going to draw your users in. So things like social proof and curiosity, exclusivity, loss aversion, what are all the different behavioral mechanisms that you can use to kind of draw people in? For us, using user data is really important. So looking at, for example, you have 3 open invoices for $8,000. We can actually get those invoices funded for you with a third party. So how do we kind of use that data, what we know about them, to come up with more relevant solutions and help them discover new aspects that they haven't already tried? And then lastly, kind of this visualize the value piece, giving them a sneak peek of features or a sneak peek of functionality, or kind of showing something that looks ghosted out but it's almost on with their data, for example, has also worked really well in helping people get to that understand moment faster, because they can already kind of see what the benefit will look like. They can imagine what the achieve benefit phase will be if you kind of bring some of that into the early discovery. Then on the other understand side, we already kind of talked about this a little bit, but really thinking about like what's at stake, what could go wrong if the user doesn't do this thing or use this feature. For us, it's a lot of compliance things, so it's a little bit easier. It's not like, if you don't use Uber, well, you can just use Lyft or regular taxi. For us, if you don't do your accounting, you could actually end up getting audited and owe a lot of money. But a lot of people don't know that coming in, so kind of exposing them to those things, and then making sure that you're really designing for that aha moment. You want to design for them like really a new understanding that they didn't have before. And then focusing on the unique value proposition and how much it will cost, making sure they understand the full spectrum before they dive right into setup, which is where, again, we kind of speed them up. So not asking for info that you don't need, teaching throughout the process of doing. So learn by doing is great to use in the setup phase, asking simple questions, demonstrating progress. This is also the phase where you really establish trust. So things like voice and tone become really important here because this is their kind of first interaction back and forth with you and the product. So how does it sound? How does it make them feel like, wow, they have my back? They're guiding me through this experience. And then when we get to achieve the benefit, this is what we like to call an ownable moment, which is the moment where it's really core to your product offering. And how do you really celebrate that moment and make it a huge success for the user achieving that benefit for the first time? What's going to really make them feel really good about, wow, I accomplished this thing. I got this thing done. I finished the job. And then thinking about how to clarify the next steps and designing for that repeat use and behavior engagement. So it could be that it's getting them to the first payroll is achieving the benefit, and they've cut paychecks for employees once. How do we make sure that they want to do that again? Are there behavioral mechanics we can use to say, wow, you did that in like 15 seconds. That was super fast. Try for 10 next time. What are things that we can use to kind of re-engage them? And that's where Seal the Deal comes in, ensuring that they understand the implications of the cost of the product and that they feel that the value that they're getting by achieving the benefit is worth the cost. In our case, because we have the trial period, this comes at the end. For other products, it could be that Seal the Deal has to come first, and you have to do even a little bit more work up front with this clarity of kind of pricing communication.